All right, so today we're really going deep into the life of Leonard Cohen.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, specifically the 1970s for him,
Okay.
a decade where he had some, really big musical successes, but also, man, some heavy personal turmoil going on.
Yeah.
And we're going to use Michael Posner's book as kind of our guide here, Leonard Cohen, Untold Stories, from This Broken Hill, Volume 2.
Oh, this book. I love it. It's like, it's full of these firsthand accounts. Like imagine like just being able to hear from his friends,
Yeah.
lovers, collaborators, it gives you that real insider perspective.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's really like a backstage pass to such a fascinating time in his life.
Absolutely.
And speaking of fascinating, one thing that really struck me was this contrast, right? So he's gaining this massive following in Europe. His music's taking off, but meanwhile his personal life is, you know,
Yeah.
kind of falling apart.
A little bit.
His relationship with Suzanne Elrod, who, is the mother of his children.
Right.
It's super rocky at this point.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that Posner, he doesn't shy away from that kind of darker side, right?
Yeah.
He really reveals like the depth of Cohen's struggles
Yeah.
alongside all that outward success.
Yeah.
He's battling depression, he's grappling with fatherhood, he's, engaging in these affairs
Right.
and he's still, producing this incredible music.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, right?
It really is.
Like, how does that all work? There's this anecdote that really stuck with me from Steve Machat,
Okay.
who knew Cohen, and he said, right now I'm walking around Miami. I would tell you it's partly sunny. Leonard Cohen would tell you it's partly cloudy.
Ah, I love that. That's such a great way to sum up like his personality, right? This melancholic nature, that kind of tendency to always see the shadows, even when things are, seemingly bright.
Yeah, yeah. And it makes you wonder how that melancholy, that awareness of kind of the darker parts of life, how did that actually influence his creative process?
Well, and that's a question that kind of runs through this whole book,
Yeah.
It seems like for Cohen, creativity and suffering, they were really intertwined. Like he needed to go to those dark places to really find that raw material for his art.
Yeah, it reminds me of that saying that, like the best art comes from pain or something like that.
Exactly, exactly. And
Well,
and Cohen himself, he kind of acknowledged this connection too. He once said, if you're not capable of some kind of madness, then you shouldn't try to be a writer.
right, right. So maybe that inherent sadness, that, partly cloudy perspective was actually like a source of his creative power.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, okay. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another part of his personality that I found really fascinating, which is um, his kind of complicated relationship with his own charisma. Like, this guy was magnetic,
Oh, yeah.
right? He drew people in,
Mm.
but he seemed almost wary of it, like he was suspicious of that power.
It's like he saw it as this double-edged sword.
No.
He knew how it could be used to manipulate, and I think he was really wary of that, even in himself.
He said, and I'm quoting here, a lot of them are just headhunters. They know how to gather people around them. That's what their gig is. I was always suspicious of it because I was able to do it in my own small way. It doesn't necessarily indicate any special concern for others or charity in your soul. It just represents the exercise of a gift, usually for your own mean purposes.
Wow. That's such a revealing statement, right?
Yeah.
It shows that he wasn't just interested in charming people,
Yeah.
He really wanted something deeper, something more authentic.
Yeah, yeah. And that search for authenticity, for something beyond the superficial, I think, led him to explore different spiritual paths.
Yeah.
And his relationship is in Buddhism, and his mentor, Sasaki Roshi, is a big part of this.
Absolutely.
So Cohen spent time at Mount Baldy Zen Center, immersing himself in meditation, disciplined lifestyle. But it wasn't all, seriousness and serenity.
No.
Posner includes this hilarious anecdote about Roshi advising both Cohen and Barry Wexler,
Oh, yeah.
who was a young friend of Cohen's, to watch their third legs.
Oh, my gosh.
So for folks who maybe aren't familiar with Zen sayings, he was basically telling them to be mindful of their
Yeah.
more lustful urges, let's say. It's a classic example of Roshi's, unconventional teaching style, right?
Right.
Blending humor with this profound wisdom.
Absolutely. And it also shows, even though Cohen is on this path to enlightenment, he's still very much a man grappling with, earthly desires.
Right.
He's human.
Totally. Yeah. Which brings us to his his rather provocative views on marriage and fatherhood.
Okay.
He famously called them a catastrophe,
Mm.
even the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Wow.
Pretty strong statement, right?
Yeah, especially considering, he had just become a father himself.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about his commitment to family life, especially,
Right.
given his relationship with Elrod and the affairs.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated when you consider his ongoing battle with depression.
Right. Yeah.
He once described depression as the destruction of your value system
Mm.
and the complete disintegration of the value of all your opinions.
That's heavy.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could see how the weight of fatherhood,
Yeah.
the societal expectations, the responsibility, it might have felt really, really crushing to someone who's struggling with those kinds of internal demons.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really paints this picture of a man who's just pulled in so many different directions,
Yeah.
internally and externally.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that internal struggle, that sense of being torn is actually what fueled like that creative fire in him.
Oh, I like that. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Speaking of creative fire, let's talk about his collaborations. He worked with some amazing artists,
You did, yeah.
but not all of these partnerships were like harmonious.
Right.
His collaboration with Phil Spector on the Death of a Ladies Man album.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
kind of infamous for its clashes and creative
It's very
differences.
legendary, yeah.
So Spector, for folks who don't know, he was the mastermind behind the Wall of Sound production technique.
Right.
Big personality
Yeah.
and kind of a tendency to dominate the recording process, let's say.
Right. To put it mildly.
To put it mildly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to give you an idea of what Wall of Sound even means,
Mhm.
picture like layers upon layers of instruments and vocals.
Yeah.
This dense, almost overwhelming sonic experience.
Very different from Cohen's style.
Very, very different from Cohen's more like introspective poetic style.
Yeah.
And so their personalities, they clashed.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some wild stories that came out of that. Like
Yeah.
the one where Spector allegedly held a gun to Cohen's head during a recording session.
Yeah, that's a pretty famous anecdote. It really speaks to the tension and like volatility
Oh, yeah.
of that whole project.
Cohen later called the album a disaster. And it's clear from Posner's account that he felt, artistically stifled by Spector's approach.
Totally. He had no creative control. I mean, the album ended up sounding nothing like what he'd envisioned.
Yeah, yeah. It's a reminder that even geniuses, they butt heads sometimes.
They do.
And those creative clashes can lead to less than stellar results.
Definitely.
And speaking of creative setbacks, Cohen also experienced disappointment with a musical that he co-wrote called Sisters of Mercy,
Right.
which closed after a short run.
Yeah, it's interesting, even with his growing fame, he still faced like these artistic challenges and disappointments. I mean, it shows that even, for someone at his level, the creative process, it's not always smooth sailing.
Yeah, it humanizes him, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of brilliance, let's talk about, Cohen's identity as a poet.
Okay.
His poetry was deeply intertwined with his music.
Right.
But, it wasn't always an easy journey for him.
No, definitely not.
He struggled to complete his poetry collection, Death of a Ladies Man. And then, when it was finally published, it got kind of a mixed reception from critics.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's really captivating is how Posner shows us his dedication
Yes.
to his craft,
Yeah.
to his writing.
He would just meticulously refine every word.
Yeah.
Like agonizing over every phrase.
There's also an obsession, this pursuit of like the perfect expression. Yeah. And that same meticulousness, that attention to detail, it also showed up in his relationships with women, which were a major source of inspiration and, let's say, complication in his life.
Yeah, a little bit complicated.
Yeah. So Posner, he interviewed many women who had relationships with Cohen, and each one offers this unique perspective on his personality and his allure.
Right, right.
So names like, Joan Bach, Michelle Hornby, Patsy Stewart
Yeah.
come up. And then there's Patricia Nolan, who offered this really insightful observation about his romantic choices.
Okay.
She said, all those blondes in his life, the Madonnas, Marianne being Queen Madonna, there's the blondes and the dark ones, like Suzanne Elrod and Suzanne Verdal, the Madonnas and the whores, the saint and the whore. This dichotomy is part of most men's erotic passage.
it's like this lens through which you can view all of his relationships.
Yeah.
You know, he was drawn to both innocence and experience.
Yeah.
Like constantly searching for something that maybe he could never fully grasp.
Yeah. Right. Right. This yearning, this endless searching that just seems to be this recurring theme
Yeah,
in his life and in his art.
absolutely.
And that brings us to one of his most, I mean, I think probably his most iconic song,
Yeah.
Hallelujah. It's a song that I think really embodies that yearning, that search for meaning and connection.
Totally. And it's so interesting to think about the fact that this song that is so well known and so beloved,
Yeah.
you know, it went through so many revisions,
Yeah.
drafts. I mean, Posner really dives into that whole story.
Yeah, he shares anecdotes about Cohen, asking
Mhm.
for feedback from friends, collaborators,
Mhm.
like John Lissauer. Even Brandon Eyre, who jokingly accused Cohen of, quote-unquote, pulling a Dylan with the song's kind of
Yeah.
religious
Oh, I
overtones.
love that.
Pulling a Dylan, that's so funny.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just him, like, locked away in a room,
No, not at all.
churning out this masterpiece.
He bounced ideas off of people. He experimented. He even, he played the finished song for Dorian Miller and asked him, is it any good?
Wow.
Can you imagine
Yeah.
pouring your soul into something like that and then still needing that reassurance?
It's almost like he couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of his own creation.
Yeah, or maybe he just needed that validation,
Yeah.
from someone else to really believe in it.
Yeah. It speaks to a certain vulnerability, I think,
Absolutely.
that seems kind of at odds with the public persona, right?
Yeah.
Of this, like, brooding, enigmatic figure.
Yeah, and yet that vulnerability, I think, is part of what makes his music so relatable, so human.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this really, really complex picture emerging here,
Yeah.
right? Cohen's, like, juggling this skyrocketing career
Yeah.
with this turbulent personal life.
Yeah.
This deep spiritual seeking with, earthly desires, creative triumphs, artistic setbacks.
Mhm.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of the 1970s.
Right, a time of huge change.
Right, this time of social and cultural upheaval.
Yeah.
And it was a decade that both mirrored and fueled his own inner turmoil, it seems.
Absolutely.
And Posner just captures it brilliantly, I think,
Yeah.
in this book. Gives us this really unprecedented access to the man behind the myth.
It's a must read for sure if you want to understand like the forces that really shaped him
Yeah, for you.
as both an artist and a man.
For sure.
It's interesting though, like even as Hallelujah is kind of taking shape,
Yeah.
he's still exploring all these different musical avenues, like
Yeah.
his 1979 album, Recent Songs.
Okay.
It's such a good example of that.
Yeah, it's definitely like a different vibe from the Death of a Ladies' Man album, for sure.
Yeah.
Much more stripped down, acoustic,
Yeah.
almost meditative in places.
Where it's like this very deliberate move away from the excess of the Phil Spector project.
Right.
And he brought in these musicians like Rafi Hakopian on violin and John Bilizikjian on oud, which gives the album this really unique like world music flavor.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it shows, his willingness to experiment,
Yeah,
push boundaries, bring different sounds in.
totally.
Yeah.
And even though it was a more subdued sound, like the emotional intensity is still there.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a quote from Ralphie in the book. He talks about the atmosphere during the recording sessions, and he says, "There was a real reverence for Leonard's songs, his voice, knowing there were thousands of people out there completely focused, and with him, we had never experienced that before."
Ooh, that gives me chills. That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's like you can almost feel the weight of those emotions,
Yeah.
like the connection between the music and the listeners,
Uh-huh.
even now, all these years later.
Absolutely. It's a real testament to the power of Cohen's artistry, His ability to create music that transcends time and space.
Yeah, totally. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
It wasn't all serious introspection and musical exploration.
Right.
Posner also kind of digs into some of the less, shall we say, monastic aspects of his life during this time.
Oh, yeah.
His penchant for brandy while on tour, apparently.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Each tour had its own alcoholic theme.
Yes.
And for the Recent Songs tour, it was brandy.
Brandy, yeah.
That's pretty funny.
It is. I love that detail.
I wonder if that was, like a creative fuel or just a way to unwind after after the shows.
Maybe a bit of both. I
Yeah.
mean, there's this quote from Steve Medar, who was a guitarist on that tour. He says, "I couldn't keep up with Leonard, but if he was drunk on stage, you couldn't tell. He'd only drink before and during a concert, never after, and never the day off. As he often said, he only drank professionally."
Wow. I love that.
So even his drinking had this artistic discipline to it, you know? Yeah, it's like he compartmentalized everything.
Right.
Even his vices.
Like he was just approaching life as this grand performance,
Yeah, I like
with
that.
everything carefully orchestrated.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're moving into the early 1980s now.
Okay.
He's still creating, still touring, but there are some big shifts happening in his life too.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, his relationship with Elrod is nearing its end.
Yeah.
He's working on new material, including what would become the Various Positions album,
Right.
which of course features Hallelujah.
Yes.
But he's also getting involved in other creative projects, like a film collaboration with Louis Fury called Night Magic.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
I haven't actually seen it, but Posner describes it as this like visually stunning, dreamlike exploration of love, loss, and the creative process. So it seems like a natural extension of what he was doing with his music.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, he was never one to be confined to just a single medium, you know. But amidst all this creative exploration, like life throws him this curveball.
Yeah.
His mother passes away in 1981.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
Posner portrays this as a real turning point for him, you know. He goes into this period of deep mourning, withdraws from the world, seeks solace in his writing.
It's interesting how even in the face of such a profound loss, like he turns to his art,
Yeah.
you know, as a source of comfort and meaning.
I think that was his way of processing grief, you know, of
Yeah.
making sense of the world.
Yeah. And it's around this time that his Jewish heritage comes more sharply into focus.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Posner talks about how after his mother's death, Cohen really starts to spend more time studying Jewish texts, reconnecting with his spiritual roots. He even reconnects with his cousin, the poet Irving Layton, who described Cohen as quote, a heroic troubadour. And Layton says this: "It's the heroism of our time, where we cannot call on God or destiny or communism or socialism or nationalism to help us. Man, alone, alienated by himself, has to work out his own salvation."
Wow.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It really speaks to those existential themes that run through his work, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's really wrestling with these questions of faith, identity, you know, the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how that exploration of his Jewish heritage intersects with his fascination with Jesus.
Right.
Posner mentions a conversation where Cohen actually referred to Jesus as, quote, the coolest guy that ever lived.
I know, it's such an unexpected comment.
It is.
Coming from a, devout Jew, but it just shows his openness to different spiritual traditions.
Right.
You know, he wasn't afraid to find wisdom and inspiration in kind of unexpected places.
Yeah, it's like he's constantly searching, constantly trying to piece together this puzzle.
Absolutely. And even as he's exploring his Jewish roots, he still finds solace in Zen Buddhism, you know. He returns to Mount Baldy for these extended periods.
Yeah, it's almost like he's drawing from both traditions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Finding elements that resonate
exactly
with his own kind of personal spiritual journey.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It
Yeah.
speaks to his intellectual curiosity, his willingness to embrace like paradox and complexity.
Yeah. And that complexity extends to his personal life as well.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, even as he's grappling with grief, with spiritual searching, his romantic life continues to be a source of both inspiration and turmoil.
Yeah, yeah.
So Posner introduces us to a whole new cast of characters here.
Yeah.
Cynthia Grant, who is a theater director, who had this kind of awkward encounter with Cohen.
Yes.
In a Tel Aviv hotel room.
Yes.
During the Lebanon War.
Right.
And Gabriela Valenzuela, who was a young student who became a muse.
Yeah.
And inspired the song Dance Me to the End of Love.
Wow.
I mean, Dance Me to the End of Love, it's such a beautiful, haunting song.
I know.
And to think that it was inspired by this chance encounter with the student in Brussels.
It's amazing, yeah. And their relationship, passionate but ultimately short-lived. And Valenzuela describes Cohen as quote, Ceremoniously quiet, minimalist, extremely focused, pouring his heart out.
Hmm. It sounds like a classic Cohen romance, right?
Yeah.
Intense, soulful, but ultimately fleeting.
Yeah, it's like this pattern in
Right.
his life.
And yet, even as he's, got a breaking hearts, he's also forging these deep friendships
Yeah.
and connections
Yeah.
with people who recognize his genius.
Yes,
I'd say,
absolutely.
like Kelly Lynch, who became his manager and confidant,
Yeah.
and Jennifer Warnes,
Oh, yeah.
right? A singer who collaborated with him
Beautiful voice.
on several albums,
Yes.
and described him as always searching.
Mm.
It's amazing how he could navigate those seemingly contradictory impulses, right? Like the need for connection, but also this tendency to withdraw,
Yeah.
the desire for love, but also this fear of commitment.
Yeah.
It's really part of what makes him such a fascinating figure, I think.
He does. He really embodies so many of the contradictions and the complexities of what it means to be human.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're nearing the mid-1980s now.
Okay.
He's released various positions, Hallelujah's out there,
Yeah.
but it hasn't quite, achieved its iconic status yet. He's
No.
still searching,
Yeah.
still evolving, both as an artist and a man.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Ooh. Okay.
Hold on to your hats, because we're about to enter a period of some intense upheaval in his life.
Right.
His relationship with Elrod kind of implodes. He faces financial struggles,
Oh no.
and his Zen master Roshi is caught up in this scandal
Oh wow.
that really shakes Cohen's spiritual foundations.
Wow. So it's like everything he relied on, everything he believed in, is suddenly like
No.
being called into question.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like we're about to witness this major turning point in his journey.
Yeah. So like we were saying, Cohen's facing this perfect storm, right?
He is, huh?
Personal, professional, like everything's just kind of fallen apart for him.
Yeah, mid-1980s.
Yeah, the relationship with Suzanne Elrod is over.
Right.
His finances are a mess because of Kelly Lynch, his manager.
Yeah.
And then Roshi,
Well, yeah.
this scandal,
Yeah.
it's gotta be just rocking him.
It really does, you
Yeah.
know? Like, it's like everything he thought was solid
Yeah, like his whole world is just
crumbles.
yeah.
And so how does he respond to all of this?
Well, I mean, in a way, he does what he's always done.
Mm.
He retreats into his art. He
Right.
seeks meaning. He seeks solace. Like, when the world feels chaotic, he turns to his art.
Yeah, and that retreat leads him back to Mount Baldy Zen Center, where he spends 5 years living this like monastic life.
Yeah.
Meditation, chanting, physical labor.
That's quite a change of pace for someone who's used to,
Yeah,
the spotlight, touring, all that.
right. I wonder what really drew him back to that kind of environment,
Yeah.
especially with all this other stuff going on.
Maybe he needed that stillness, that simplicity.
Yeah.
To process everything that was happening.
Right, to find some grounding
Yeah.
amidst the chaos.
Yeah, I think Posner describes his time at Mount Baldy as like this period of deep introspection, a stripping away of what wasn't essential.
So not running away from the problems.
No, not really. More like
Yeah.
seeking a new perspective
Yeah, right.
on them.
Yeah, and during this time, like, he's still creating, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This experience actually, like, informs the 1988 album I'm Your Man.
Right, and you can hear it, I think, in the music.
It's definitely got a different feel than the earlier stuff.
Yeah, it's more electronic,
Yeah.
more contemporary.
But it's still got that,
It's still Cohen, yeah.
that melancholy, that
Right.
introspection.
Yeah, and you can hear the influence of his Zen practice, I think, in the lyrics too.
Yeah.
There's a sense of acceptance and
Yeah.
tranquility that maybe wasn't there before.
Right. There's this maturity, this wisdom that seems to have emerged.
Yeah, it's like he went through the fire and came out,
Yeah.
transformed.
Stronger.
Yeah, but it wasn't all easy at Mount Baldy either. Right.
Posner talks about his struggles with the routine, the physical demands of it all.
Yeah.
And just the emotional toll of being separated from his kids.
Hmm.
He really missed them.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the book where he's calling his son Adam, and you can feel that sense of loss. It's a reminder that even when you're seeking enlightenment, like human connections,
Yeah.
they're still so important.
Yeah, and then there's the whole Roshi thing,
Ugh, right.
right? I mean, to have the foundations of your faith shaken like that,
It's a betrayal, isn't it?
it really is.
On this, like, really profound level.
And it forces him to kind of re-examine everything.
Yeah, his beliefs, his relationship with Roshi.
Everything. But what's amazing is that even with that disillusionment, his faith doesn't completely go away.
I know, it's incredible.
He keeps practicing Zen Buddhism,
Yeah.
finds solace in the teachings.
Even while he's grappling with the, the imperfections of the people.
Of the people, yeah.
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 And I think that speaks to this capacity that he had to hold these contradictory ideas.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Finding truth and beauty, even in the midst of the darkness.
And I think that duality, that ability to embrace both the light and the shadow,
Yeah.
that's what makes his art so powerful.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And you see it in I'm Your Man.
Yeah.
This album that explores love and loss and faith and doubt
Yeah.
with such honesty
That's right.
and vulnerability. It's really incredible.
It resonates because it's real, right?
It is. It's the human experience.
Yeah, the messy, the beautiful, like all of it.
Yeah, all of it.
And so on top of all of this,
Right.
Spiritual stuff, the emotional stuff,
Right.
he's also dealing with this huge financial blow.
Right. Kelly Lynch.
Yeah, his manager.
Yeah, his longtime manager, confidant.
It's like a punch in the gut, I imagine.
Oh yeah, total violation of trust.
He has to sue her,
Yeah.
to try to get his finances back in order.
I mean, I'm
Imagine
it's a lot.
having to rebuild your financial security at that point in your life.
Yeah, in your late 50s?
Yeah.
After, years of working, creating.
It's incredible that he was able to
I know.
not only face that but come out stronger.
And of course, what does he do?
He turns it into art.
He writes about it,
Yeah.
pours his emotions, his reflections into his music.
That's Cohen.
Yeah. And then he hits the road again.
He does, yeah.
1988
Big tour.
to promote I'm Your Man.
Yeah, and it's like this triumphant return.
Yeah.
He connects with fans, he reclaims his place.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the music either.
Yeah.
He reconnects with his kids on this tour.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful moment where his daughter Lorca joins him on stage in Paris.
Oh, that's awesome. It's this like symbol of reconciliation,
Yeah.
the power of family.
Yeah, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have a lot of ground.
We've seen Cohen at his his creative peaks and in his lowest moments.
Yeah, we've seen it all.
We've talked about his spiritual seeking, his romantic life, his battles with depression,
Yeah.
his financial struggles,
Right.
his dedication to his art,
Which never wavered.
never wavered, and through it all, he never loses his sense of humor
No, he doesn't.
or his intellect or this profound empathy that he had
Yeah.
for the human condition.
It's really remarkable.
It is.
I think Posner's book really gives us this intimate portrait of someone who just embraced life.
Yeah.
All the complexities, the messiness, the beauty.
And I think that's what makes his music so powerful.
Totally.
It speaks to that shared humanity,
Yeah.
the joys, the sorrows,
The ups and downs.
the triumphs and the failures.
It's all there.
It's all there. And it reminds us, I think, that even in the face of really hard times, really tough stuff,
Yeah.
there's beauty to be found,
Always.
meaning to be made, connections to be had.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up here,
Okay.
I just want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
What is it about Leonard Cohen's work
Yeah.
that resonates with you?
Mm.
What is it about his voice, his words, his music that touches you?
Yeah.
And I encourage you to explore his work more.
Yes.
Discover your own answers to that question
Yeah.
and find, maybe some solace, some inspiration in all of it.
Because that's what he was all about.
Yeah. Oh.
Delving deeper, embracing the full experience
Yeah.
and finding solace in this shared journey of being alive.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed exploring the life and legacy of this incredible artist.
He was truly one of a kind.
He really was.
And I hope you continue the conversation,
Yeah.
Share your thoughts, your reflections on Cohen with others.
Yeah, for sure. Keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep listening.
Absolutely.